Welcome, sister friends. Good morning. If you're new here, welcome. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure and subscribe. We're so happy to have you here. I hope you learned something helpful today. And if you do, please let me know and let me know where you're watching from. This is going to end up being a 3-part series on how to paint your kitchen or bathroom or whatever cabinets. I'm doing with what I have available today, but this is one of the times that you want to make sure you have the right tools and you're doing the right things. This is I've used this cabinet door before to show you samples of. I think that's Silk Dixie Belle and DIY paint, but we're going to use this side. This is called a raised panel door. Whenever it has this outer edge, and these are usually tongue and grooved in, then this part is routed out, and then it has a raised panel in the middle, so gives it more of a profile. That's called a raised panel door. And these are really ideal for painting and then using a glaze or a wash or a wax or something to accentuate the details. They come a lot fancier than this, of course. This is something I got at I can't remember the name of the store. That we don't have it anymore anyway, but it's similar to Goodwill. Habitat for Humanity Restore. There used to be one about an hour from here. About 2 weeks after I found out we had one, it closed down. So this is dirty. I can feel it on my fingers, but even if you couldn't, in your kitchen especially, grease gets, even when you use your fan and things like that, grease gets on these things. So it's absolutely 100% mandatory that you clean these, and you clean these well. I'm going to use Dixie Belle White Lightning, which is like a TSP based product, and it cleans off the old grease and the layers of grease. And you may, if the ones particularly by your stove, that kind of thing, you may have to, depending on how good your fan is, you may have to clean these 2 or 3 times. One other thing that, before I get started good, that I want to say is, whenever it's easier to remove the cabinet doors in the long run for this painting process. And when you remove them, you're going to want to remove your hardware. My 2 screwdrivers that I had available here don't work this morning, and since this is just for a demonstration, I'm not going to worry about that, but you absolutely need to worry about that. When you're working on furniture nowadays, it's in style to paint the hardware and stuff like that. That's not the case with kitchen cabinets. They get too much use, and you really need to take the hardware off. And one thing I wanted to make sure and say is, before you take your doors off, before you do anything, go to the back side of your door. Name them whatever you want to name them, but we can name them uppers and lowers. That's what they would traditionally be named. And you mark your doors on back with a pencil. So I'm going to say upper 1, and I'm going to know that I'm going left to right, because that's just the way my brain works. So I would put a U1 here and write a U1 inside that cabinet door, just in case somebody else besides me was putting them up. Not likely, but just in case. So take a pencil, mark your door so you know exactly where that door goes. And the same thing with your hardware. You can get, I've seen people use a Ziploc or a plastic bowl or whatever to put all the hardware in. But even though you go to the store and you know, the home store, and you buy all this hardware at one time, how it fits in those holes on your base frame and on your cabinet door varies. So what I do is take these off and put them inside the cabinet that they go on. So when the doors are finished and we're going to go put it back, the hardware for this particular door is sitting on the shelf inside this door. This particular one has a wooden piece handle, and you could leave that on there, and if you wanted to paint it the same as the door, I would still take it off. So I'm taking this off. I would still take it off and paint it separately in case you change your mind later on. I don't know if you can see on this one, where this one was top coated and faded over time or deepened over time, and this didn't because it was hidden. So you really don't want to see that, because what if you come back and say, okay, I don't like these, you want a different one, it's a little bit smaller, that's going to show. So my recommendation is, even if you're going to paint these, take them off. This won't be as important, and put the screw in the back of it so you don't lose which one goes to what. And what I generally would do if I'm gonna paint these is go to the Dollar Tree or the floral supply store and get a piece of foam, or if you have some big styrofoam, you can stick these all in it using their little backs on them, and then that lets you hold it by the screw, paint all over it, and stick it back in there. Touch up if you need to while it's on there. We've got it marked. We're gonna pretend we have this hardware off of it. And the next thing is going to be to clean it with the TSP. I guess before I do that, well, let me do that and then we'll talk about everything else we have here. I'm wearing a glove because this is a chemical. And I like to use these little scrubby sponges. You can get them at the dollar store, whatever store you shop at, I'm sure has them. And I mixed probably about a teaspoon of White Lightning in this bowl of water. And I'm going around with the scrubby side, getting this all over. And this not only removes grease and removes residue and stuff like that, any type of furniture polish that may be on there and stuff, but it also deglazes a little bit. And that means takes off, or dulls the sheen, I guess is the easy way to put it. And dulling the sheen is important because if a surface is too slick, all of the new stuff you're about to put on here is not going to stick good. And then later on, you're going to think, you know, my goodness, why is that scraping off? Why is that not doing good? You know, that paint must be terrible. It's not. Your prep has to be good. Even whenever you're using a chalky style paint, that, you know, and those are famous for not a whole lot of prep being necessary, but it is necessary on this type of surface if you're going to use it a lot and you want to make sure that it's going to continue to look good, and that, you know, all the hours and the time that you're putting into this are going to last and be worth your while and look beautiful for years and years to come until you change your mind on it. So this is pretty simple. You can mix this stuff up in a spray bottle if you want to, spray it on here. Sometimes I do it that way, but I'm kind of scrubbing at it now with the scrubby side to make sure that any, you know, caked on yuckiness is gone. And then it's very important to rinse this off because this is going to leave, you know, it's going to deglaze, but there's the potential of it leaving a little bit of a residue too. So hopefully you can, I don't want to dump it out, but this water's nasty. Just trust me on that one. Okay, then you need to rinse it off. I have a bucket of clear water and just a rag of whatever sort that is your work rag, because you won't, you know, you won't want this to be one you would use again in your kitchen or something. So I like these chamois kind. It doesn't take a whole lot of water. I'm going to wipe over the whole thing once with this, rinse out my rag, and do it again, getting around the edges really good. I consider this part just like putting some love into my project, you know. I'm using my fingernail inside this rag to make sure and get up next to those edges really good. Okay, so while this is drying, which it won't take but a second. Okay, other supplies that you'll need a glove, your White Lightning, bowl of water and a scrubby sponge for that, screwdrivers or a screw gun, drill, whatever you want to call it, to remove your hardware, something to keep your hardware, pencils to mark the back of your doors and drawers, same thing. This one is a medium grit sandpaper, and it never hurts to do what's called scuff sanding. And this is enough to be scuff sanding right here. It doesn't matter. I'm going over this with it damp, and that's just fine. Just enough tooth in there to take off any extra, anything that may have been brought to the surface but not rinsed off with the TSP or with the White Lightning. And I can see that dulling this finish, so I absolutely know that that is scuffed enough. Now you'll want to rinse that off again because there may be little bitty bits of sawdust and things on there that will impede the paint sticking the way we want it to. I use plenty of drop cloths because when you have a whole lot to do, you're likely to be doing it faster. Okay, I have my paint that I'm gonna paint them with, and man, this has not been open for a while. Here's my trick. I turn it upside down and bang it on the floor. Let's see if that works. Yep. Okay, this is Buttercream by Dixie Belle. You can buy a commercial glaze or make a wash, whatever you want to do. And if you wanted to make a glaze, you would mix the color, this is coffee bean, you would mix the color that you have with Satin Topcoat, and that's going to make your own glaze. Then you don't have to buy a separate glaze, or you can just buy one, because then you don't have to worry with taking the time to do that. Or you can make it like a wash by mixing your paint just with water. This is a water-based paint. You need stir sticks, because you always need to stir your top coats in your paint. These are just craft sticks that come like 5,000 to a box. An applicator of some sort that's going to either give you a smooth finish with your final top coats, or we'll talk about this when we get to the finishes. You can dab with it to get a little bit of a textured top coat that will show less fingerprints. So we'll talk about that on that day, but your tools are very important. I have the bucket of water for rinsing my brushes, and I have a spray bottle for misting, and then you're gonna need, this is important because you want more of a smooth finish on your cabinets for it to look good and professional. You're going to want to use a good synthetic brush. I love my very favorite is the Dixie Belle Mini Angle. It looks like this. They have a mini flat, a round, a large flat, which this one's already out and open, so this is the one I'm going to use today. But I like the mini better because it fits my wrist better. But you're going to get smoother strokes with that. Your mister bottle, and then a liner or a small round brush of some sort, and I'll put this in the, if you're interested, info on this, it's in my Amazon store, which is amazon.com/sisterhood of the traveling brush, I believe. But that'll be the one where we put our dark details in with. I'm gonna go ahead and start because the water mixes well with the paint anyway. So let's get it open and get it stirred. This is very thick. With the Dixie Belle paint, if you want it a little bit thinner, you can just spray some water in here like this and thin it out a little bit. I always work with a damp brush. If it's real dry, which it is here pretty much right now, you can mist your cabinet door ahead of time. This is still pretty thick, but that's okay. A-okay. I'm gonna dampen my brush. I just put the brush in the water about halfway, and I'm gonna still pull off the excess water. Dip her in here and let her rip. Now you want to specifically, I only have paint on maybe the bottom third of the brush. If there were any imperfections, you would have sanded those off already. But we are going to follow the wood grain. And in the cabinet doors, almost always it's gonna go long ways, right? But here on the bottom, it would go sideways. These are called rails and stiles, if you need to know that. But, okay. Let's do the center first. I like to go ahead and get any of the tough stuff first. Like, we're wanting to make sure that we get good and down in these indentations and around the creases and crevices and other areas. So I usually just get that in there first to make sure that I have everything covered. And then I'll come back and smooth it out and get the rest. And it's nothing to stress over. That's the main thing I want you to realize is, girl, you can do this. You absolutely can do this. And you can change the entire look of your kitchen or your bathroom by yourself in a weekend. If I keep this moist enough as I'm going, damp enough, the brush strokes are gonna flatten out for the most part on their own. After this coat dries, I will come back with that Dixie Belle sanding pad. Will probably be the one I use. That's like a 220 grit, which is a very fine sandpaper. Another thing, I'm a doofus for not telling you this earlier, I'm sorry. If you are like me and you absolutely positively don't have anybody to help you at that moment, I don't recommend this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. You could tape this off. If you absolutely positively have to leave that hardware on there, like the screw is frozen in there because these cabinets were built in 1950 and it just won't come off, and your drill won't do it, you've wallowed out the holes and you're just not going to do it. The next option would be taking your painter's tape and covering this hardware with the painter's tape so that you don't get the paint on it. I should have done that part to show y'all, and I didn't because I was in a hurry. I'm gonna lightly sand, not to sand anything off, just lightly to knock down any ridges that may still be there from the painting. There'll be less of them because I used wet paint and a synthetic brush and a self-leveling paint. I'm a human being and things happen, so I'm gonna slightly give it a little tooth, knock some of that down, wipe it back off with a damp rag, and put the second coat on exactly how I put this coat on. Sometimes if your cabinets are the type that had a really thick coat of polyurethane or something, varnish or something like that ahead of time, you're gonna need to sand that down enough to really have some tooth so that it can grab that. Most cabinets do not, but there are some that do. And if you have that style, your scuffing will need to be a little bit more until you can really tell, and you can see it when you're looking up close, that the finish has dulled some. A primer like a Slick Stick, if they're still really slick and you feel like you're gonna sand unevenness into the finish, then use a primer like a Slick Stick so that the paint will stick to that slick surface. It prepares it for you. If your cabinets are mahogany or cherry or some really type of dark wood or pine or something that has like knots showing in it, then you may want to use Boss, which it stands for blocks out stains and odors. You may want to use that before you paint. You don't have to, just like I did. If you have regular cabinets just like this was, you do it just like this. But if you have a circumstance where it's slick, sand a little and put Slick Stick. If it's a possible bleeder, which it means it's a really dark wood or has knots in it, go ahead and use a coat or two of the Boss. If the cabinets are really orange or something like that, get the gray Boss. Put that on there even if you don't need it like this, because it will save you coats of paint. I mean, you're still coating and painting on with the Boss, but you would do the same thing, sand between layers to get it smooth. In most instances, this is all you would need to do. So when I come back for part 2, I'll make a glaze and a wash, and I'll do that on here with you, and then we'll look at the differences when we put it on here, and then for part 3, we'll do our top coats and our finishing. So I hope that helps. If you have a cabinet project, make sure and take before, during, and after pictures, because you're going to be so proud of yourself whenever you're done that you're really going to want to see and remember what it used to look like compared to what it looks like when you make it lighter and brighter and the whole room seem bigger. And then using these tough top coats like the gator hide that we'll use last will make it a wipeable finish, and so you don't have to worry, oh my goodness, if I had like cabinets, grease is going to stick or they're going to look dirty and all that. Well, we're going to protect it from that. So that's not a worry either. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. Make sure and subscribe and click the little bell button to know whenever I'm coming back with video 2 and video 3 and lots of other things. If you have any questions or anything else you'd like to see or want me to try or show you or anything like that, I absolutely love the challenge. So let me know, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.